Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend a little bit of time talking about cards from The Lord of the Rings, The Living Card Game by Fantasy Flight Games. And my name is Dave Walsh.
And I am Grant Thompson, just along for the ride. And today we will be talking about Faramir from the core set.
So, Faramir is a cost of 4, and for that 4 you get 2 willpower, 1 attack, 2 defense, and 3 hit points, and he has an action where if you exhaust him, each character you controlled by the player gets +1 willpower until the end of the phase. He's a unique hero, or a unique ally with the Gondor Noble and Ranger traits. So what do you think?
In all honesty, I think he is probably still widely used to this day. If I'm running a leadership deck or have access to leadership, he's generally put in there. His ability is ungodly. If you've got a swarm of allies out and then you hoy Faramir down and exhaust them, that's +1 will. That's end game for questing. This version of him is very thematic to what he does in Ithilien. He's going around questing, taking out the perils of Gondor in this way, getting information back to Denethor and getting them back to Osgiliath. And his flavor text is brilliant. He leads now in all perilous ventures, but his life is charmed, or fate spares him for some other end. From Mablung, Ranger of Ithilien in the Two Towers. And that's a brilliant quote to talk about Faramir. And the card art is done brilliantly with it. He's in the woods, he's got his sword out, he's looking for danger, and he's like, yeah, I can take anything that comes at me.
You can imagine that he's a leader with the way that his pose is and his card art. He's got his sword out. I imagine that he's got a group of Gondorian, spearmen behind him, ready to, do whatever he commands. He is the captain of Gondor, so it's or one of the captains of Gondor.
Yeah, and I'd agree with that. And I mean, there is quite a few shenanigans that you can do with this version of Faramir. Attach Sword of Morthon to him if you're running an Outlands deck, and then he's got up to 5. Is it 5 attack he has then? No, 4 attack he has, 5 defense, 5 willpower for the cost of 4 with 6 hit points. It's right. It's beyond hero level stat.
I think the card type Gondor, that trait, I think is well developed in the game. There's a lot of Gondor choices to make. At one point we talked about when you make a deck, you kind of have to choose not only what spheres you're picking, but what heroes. But on top of that, you also have to pick what kind of overall theme you're running with, whether you want it to be Gondor, which he can fit into, which may or may not be a swarm deck, or you could run a dwarf swarm deck and put Faramir in there, and then it's, like you said, game over. And so I think that makes him really versatile. I like running him with swarm decks, and I usually just run swarm decks with him exclusive. Like, I typically don't think about him in a leadership deck, but, maybe I should.
He can go in any deck, and he works as long as you've got access to the leadership resource icon. And he is brilliant for your buck. You're paying 4 for him. His stats are almost hero level stats.
Mm-hmm.
And his ability to exhaust himself to give each character a player controls +1 willpower until the end of the phase. And that's just all characters. And it's amazing. I mean, you've said the Gondor trait is well developed now. It is. But you put that into a Gondor deck or a Hobbit deck where they've had more expansion on it, and you're like, oh my god. I mean, the dwarves especially, the dwarves already have a global willpower boost with Dane Ironfoot. You put Faramir coupled with Dane, that's a 2 willpower increase to every dwarf.
Yeah, and I think that, if you're going to run Tactics Boromir and you all of a sudden get overrun with enemies and you trigger his effect, you can put the Sword Thane in with him and make him a legitimate hero to replace Boromir if you're not running Fortune or Fate to bring Boromir back out.
Even if you're running, say, a copy of Faramir, Ally Faramir, Tactics Boromir, Leadership Denethor, and say Aragorn from whichever sphere you want, you can then play Sword of Thane on the Ally Faramir when he's out and have all four heroes of Gondor that are big in the book and in the lore that can be like saying, here we are, we're back again, we got the king.
Right. Except Aragorn was never the king while Denethor was still around.
Denethor was alive, yeah. Right. While Denethor was alive, yeah, he wasn't
Well, I guess he still was. He was the king. He just wasn't recognized as the king.
It's all about how you want to run Faramir. He's very versatile. You can get in any deck, and quite frankly, I still use him to this day over his hero counterparts.
The lore version of Faramir, where you get +1 for every enemy in the staging area, I feel like when you're running Gondorian type deck, you don't want those characters because you can just mow them down with your heroes. The ally leadership Faramir is the much better pick in my book. The only thing that I don't like about him is that he costs 4 to bring out. Not that I don't think it's not a fair cost for him. I just feel like 4 is a lot to pay for an ally when you're using a 2 or 3 sphere deck. Now, you can always bring out Steward of Gondor, and this actually satisfies my need to keep everything thematic, because the Steward of Gondor fits right in with having a leadership hero and bringing out the extra resources. So I think that that's really good, and then you can put the Rod of the Steward in there to do something with the extra resources as well.
I think in all versions of the case, if you're running Faramir, you're going to, as soon as you grow him in hand, if you don't have the resources there and then to play him, you're going to save up to play him because his ability makes up for it. You do have side quests now that allows you to bring in an ally, your deck or your hand, and if you get lucky enough to draw it that way, great. But if you don't, then you're going to have to pay that resource. And quite frankly, 4 resources for Faramir, I'd pay it. Even if they changed that 4 to a 6, I'd still find a way to pay it.
Well, if they changed the 4 to the 6, the conversation for me would be a little different because, I'm an analytical guy. So when I look at that, there's a formula to figure out what kind of the cost or reasonable cost would be, and you add the stat line plus hit points, and that should be about twice the cost of the ally. And so unless there's some sort of insane ability that would make it cost significantly more, or sometimes
he already has an insane ability,
right? And so I mean, I guess what I'm saying is Faramir at 4 fits right in with the formula. That analytical side of me that's like, well, that's 8 times, or and 4 times 2 is 8. So it fits with that formula with the insane ability. So if he were 6, that would mean in my own head I would say, oh well, is that ability worth 4? Cost, because that would mean that or worth the extra 4.
I don't actually think I've ever sat and worked out that their stats plus hit points are double their cost. Right. I don't think I've actually looked at it and worked it out like that.
Most heroes fall, or most allies fall into that.
Yeah, I'm not saying that they don't, but I've never actually worked it out like that. Right. What I look at is their cost, their stats, and their effect. and how many hit points they've got. I look at those individuals. If each one of them gets a tick, or most of them get a tick, it goes in.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I think you're looking at the ability for, regardless of the stats and things like that, but...
So, if you had a ring Faramir, with 1 being the 1 card to rule them all, and 10 being the worst of the worst, what would you ring Faramir as?
I'm going to put him right in the middle, and I'm going to put him at a 5. I think that ability is really good, but I also think he can be expensive. I'm maybe a 4, but I have to go with my gut and say he's right in the middle for me. I think that he fits the sphere that he's in. I think he is thematically accurate. I think that he pairs nicely with a lot of traits, and I think that since card pool's expanded, there's other ways to boost allies where you may or may not need to have Faramir to help quest for a bajillion. You can do it a lot of ways. How about you? What do you think?
I'd agree with what you're saying on all counts, that there are cards that you may want to prefer to put in over Faramir. For example, if you're running an Outlands deck, you'll already be questing for a bajillion without Faramir. Mm-hmm. But he is always a strong contender for any deck that I'm running leadership in. So instead of putting him middle of the road, I'm going to put him at 4. 4 rings. He's not the best ally out there, but he's not the worst either. And quite frankly, he's won many a quest for me, so 4 rings.
Well, join us next time as we tackle the Steward of Gondor, an attachment from the leadership sphere that costs 2 to bring out. So, have a great day.